So I have a harm of abortion that is also a benefit. It's like a two sides of the same coin. I refer to it as patriarchal disenfranchisement.
Hmm.
So for some people, that could be a positive, just in and of itself, stated that way. But I would say it's principally a negative socially. Legal abortion has led to this a law where a woman, mother, specifically mother, has um, rights, sort of judge, jury, executioner rights to end or continue or allowed to continue the life within her. Fathers don't. So that has led to literally just telling the father, you are less relevant. You are not half of this child's parent, really, functionally, socially. This also has obviously we can look at the 70s, and I think it really started before then, but since the legalization of abortion, fatherlessness has become ever more prevalent. There is absolutely a rising tide there. So I think that is explicitly connected. We know statistically, I think Obama talked about the most. Presidents used to talk about it a lot, but I think Obama was the last person to kind of talk heavily about it. People don't talk about it anymore. It's very weird. I don't know. There's a cultural something going on. Maybe because it's because of the fear or concerns about patriarchy, but whatever, I digress. But fatherlessness, we know statistically, is an awful indicator of outcome. That like fatherless children are just many, it's a notable percentage, a very statistically significant percentage more likely to end up in jail, end up addicted to drugs, attempt suicide, et cetera, et cetera. Basically all the things of like, oh no, bad stuff. So then that does seem to be, now can you link all those things explicitly? I think they're more generally causative. But I think this relates to what we talked about in the last episode, where it's like men aren't even supposed to really like talk about it, which then, again, especially for fathers, I was like, as 50% of the responsibility for these children, society says, no, you're not. I mean, by virtue, it says, well, you certainly aren't 50% of the agency. So then therefore you're not 50% of anything. You are less relevant. You are not the dominant parent. And I note this especially A, from research of like how this is played out, but B, as a father myself, who is the primary caregiver of my children, I also have I admit my own bias or personal offense towards that as a suggestion with it, which is implicit in the way that the laws are written. But again, you may have a different perspective on even just the phrase patriarchal disenfranchisement.
Well, I know we have different opinions about the virtues or harms of the patriarchy, which we'll address in another episode.
Yeah, as like an overarching system.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about that one. As I'm not a father, but certainly I'm an uncle, and
yeah.
I have, generally care about fathers. I care a lot about men and the state of men and the violence of men and the healing of men. And in this case, I think there's a lot of contradictions. I think as a society, we're wanting men to step up. We're wanting fathers to be more involved. And yet there are lots and lots of impediments to that. Everything from not having baby changing stations in men's bathrooms to
which is changing. I would say
which is changing, yeah. but it was brought up actually in the DEIB training recently, and I thought a pretty powerful example, because a lot of these examples, are might make it harder for men to relate or care about this work.
Sure.
And it's like, oh gosh, I guess maybe things aren't always great for men, just to have it woven in there. But in this case, to be more direct about, so yes to the shared responsibility piece, and there's also just existing social constructs that are going to be really hard to untangle. I mean, I've heard from my friends who are fathers that their mothers tend to form social groups around things like school and taking care of the kids and whatnot that might not feel inclusive at a minimum, but in some cases just are just plain out of view. Like they don't even think to invite the father. So that's a contradictory social construct to me, where it's like, oh, well, great. I mean, on the one hand, it's like, sure, I guess I understand why that's come to pass, as mothers have borne most of that burden, at least for the last couple centuries. But yeah, is that something we're working on changing, more broadly, in terms of how do we integrate fathers? How do we empower them? That's a power structure fundamentally, right? Like communication is power. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You don't know the schedule or what's happening, or
yeah. And I see that language a lot when I talk to pro-choice people in my DMs or whatever, or even just online, that referring to men as sperm donors comes up quite a bit. That is absolutely part of the, I don't know if that's, again, whenever you talk to multiple people and they say the same things, they've either arrived at the same conclusion, or it's all pursuant from the same source. I don't know what source it's from, but I hear that a lot when they're like, men are essentially sperm donors until the baby comes out. And so their opinion is not relevant. As I've argued with people of like that, I shouldn't be saying anything or whatever. I've had those arguments with lots of folks. But that's just an interesting, to me, that I was like, oh, if this played out as large as it just is in my sample size, if that played out statistically, then it really does start to, it almost demands men fill a role that I don't think anybody really wants men to fulfill. You know what I mean? This very like, it basically goes back to this weird like 1950s dad thing of like the dad who just brings home the bacon. That's it. Like you're just a contributor of material. I was like, I don't know. I don't like that personally. And I don't think that's beneficial for human development or emotional growth or, mental health or like all the good things,
Well, let's make it more personal. Like, what was your experience when your wife was pregnant? Like, what were your responsibilities?
My responsibilities were largely protective, basically keeping her safe, and then keeping the child of unknown gender within safe as well. So they were largely protective, investigative, comforting. I can't literally, it's hard because I'm a love by touch person and a love by talk person. So I could neither touch or talk to. I talked to and sang to. So my support for my child was conversant, sonorous, but a lot of it was about taking care of Archie, and to frame it in a personal thing, this is an interesting thing because certainly in my marriage, and I believe this is proper as opposed to just like, this is how I'm experimenting with things. Like Archie is my primary concern more than my children. Like the family structure, I believe, is fundamentally pyramided on the stability of the union between partners. And then children have to be secondary. And I think we live in a society where that has been super, which is one of the weirdest things about abortion, right? Is that we also live in a society where like child-led parenting is a huge, at least in my circles, is like a huge thesis. So it's like, that's weird. Like until they come out, whatever, it's up to me. Once they come out, it's all up to them. That makes that's like a transference of authority by location, or I don't even know what principle is involved in there. But it's an interesting thing to note in terms of the protective instinct is, and certainly in my life, was primarily for Archie. And I never really even felt the full protective instinct over my children until they were visible. Like we've talked about, they were visible to me. It was purely theoretical. I knew it was like the right thing to do to keep my child safe. But I didn't know it. I didn't embody it. It was not embodied until my children came out. And then I could see them. And then I was like, okay, now I know. Well, that's also interesting too, because it was also within. So I didn't actually have to, I know this is weird, but it is the protective instinct, because I have it within me intuitively, even in ways that I can barely understand. It is proximal, physical. It's based on an actual radius. Like, people talk about their personal bubble. It's like that. And so when you're partnered with someone, especially in a permanent covenanted basis, a la marriage, even in relationships too, but marriage definitely goes, it ossifies it, makes it more stone-like or bone-like. that bubble, I essentially have a personal bubble, and my personal bubble is actually very small. It might even be inside of my nasal cavities. It's not, I like touch. But it's outside of Archie, my wife, as well. And then when Aliyah, my first child, came out of the womb, it's almost like I could see it. Like I could see the sort of invisible bubble go and like move out from around Archie, because that encompasses both, into go, and it was like moved around the child as well. So people say, oh, my daughter was born and my heart just grew like the Grinch 5 sizes larger. I was like, that did not happen to me at all. All it was like, I now have to protect this child. And I feel the feelings of violence, honestly. I wanted to commit violence against every person in the delivery room and get them away from my child, because I didn't trust them. I didn't trust them at all. I don't trust doctors or hospitals because I've been in and out of them my whole life. And I find them very dubious organizations. Again, like the state. So this is why I understand the impositions of the state. But anyway, yeah. So it's I think that is endlessly fascinating. And again, why I think protection of a mother is of like equal importance, to the protection of a child.
Well, I love this. I think the more we can make it personal, the richer these stories are going to be. And Artie's been quite vocal about having postpartum depression, which I applaud as an effort to destigmatize that. Like you said, maybe especially for mothers, this expectation of like, oh, you're gonna be the perfect mother and bond and all of these things. If that doesn't happen, I can only imagine the layers upon layers of guilt. So did that then also create, when she was experiencing that, did that place additional responsibilities on you, do you feel like?
It did, certainly in this speaks, I'm going to universalize this too, but let me just speak of it personally. It absolutely did, in terms of making the protection of Aliyah, my child, more paramount, because I knew it was less a priority for Archie, due to her consideration, like internal struggles of like, I've already failed at it. And so I had to be, I think, more focused on that. I've always wanted to be the dad. I mean, I just think that's the dad to be, is the dad who's like all up in it. You know what I mean? Just like who's I was skin to skin from the moment. There was never any like, well, I don't know, she changed the diaper. I mean, I woke up for all the feedings. You know what I mean? You're like, you're in this together. This is a double thing. But it does speak to the harms, the chemical, hormonal, potential harms, or at least alterations to women via pregnancy. And talk about high percentages. I mean, it's again, it's estimated to be like more than half women experience some form of sort of either quote unquote baby blues, which is not quite postpartum, or postpartum depression, or even postpartum psychosis. Is kind of a spectrum of experience there. So in that case, it did probably bring me into a divided energy, honestly, because I was like, it is my job to maintain. I wasn't as concerned about the psychological well-being of my child at that age, in the first 3 months of their life. It's really more just like keeping the child actually alive. And then quite concerned about the psychological, like whatever, deeper or even more higher order frailties of my wife in that time. So in some ways it's cool, because then I at least have some first person experience with these things, so that they're not purely theoretical. Somewhere also of like the detriment and burden of these occupations. It's not all Instagram, whatever, Streisand filters.
No, I think you're certainly closer to the creation of human life than I am, and hopefully that humanizes anybody who wants to see you as less than human because of your ideologies.
Yeah. Which would be very funny. Well, and but that also speaks to the wider abortion harm too, is just like, it's related to the father thing, but in general, I think like legal abortion tends towards a social devaluing of human life, in that it dictates that certain lives are worth less, which means that not all human lives are of worth, which then to me, cascadingly leads to, and this again, this isn't a sliding slippery slope. This is, oh no, we're doing the bottom of the slope, so that what fills in that slope are the same thing that leads to mass shootings or racism, like rises of like white supremacy, like genuine like white supremacist organizations, and nationalism and jingoism and xenophobia and violent anti-immigrant sentiment, etc. Where it then says, oh, okay, well, because it's opened the door. And it's not only opened the door just like, maybe this is the case, but it's opened the door to the most vulnerable amongst us. And in some ways, I think like children, having been around children, or even I think pragmatically in society, that like children are the most in need of protection, right? Women and children first. And yes, you say women before you say children. Let's be honest. Let's put that in sequence. But yeah, so I think like a society that says it's okay to kill these lives, well then, just like a society we have a warlike society, then devalues, like having as active and prevalent and expensive a military as we do also fosters a lack of regard for the value of human life, which then filters out through all society. So that's a concern.
Was that another one on the list?
Yeah, that's another one. Devaluing of human life.
Yeah, and I mean, it has been useful for me to consider just the notion of, yeah, like having a sliding scale for the value of human life, and when do we value it and when do we not? Because certainly in other areas, particularly racial justice, that's something I'm actively fighting against, and
yeah,
and I know that's a correlation we've brought up a number of times. But just the idea, I think you brought it up around personhood. There could just be a lot of examples of when it could be quite dangerous to evaluate, for a third party to like evaluate the quality of a person or the value of a person.
Yeah. And essentially of me evaluating you. That's, to me, I was like, well, that's the stuff we're the most afraid of the state about, right? When they start evaluating, well, I can treat you this way, but I can treat you this way. And you're like, well, wait, what is the difference we're talking about here? And again, maybe this will transition us, unless you have something, I don't want to step on any concepts you wanted to bring up into principles, because I was like, that's where it starts to violate like ethical principles. So then here we can zoom into like, there's just kind of like a cost benefit analysis, but then, okay, that kind of gives us a pragmatist's view, but then that only partially informs like what informs ethics, because ethics are beyond, there are many things that would be pragmatically good, but ethically bad. You know what I mean?
That was if a robot was making this decision,
yeah,
it would end there potentially. I don't know. Maybe I'm not giving them enough credit. I don't know.
I know. Look at you discriminating against AI. Well, and the reason I think, again, I wanted to keep bringing up the slippery slope thing is in general, children are the most needed to be protected functionally, because we're in some ways we're a great species, y'all. In some ways we are, oh my gosh, I don't know how we made it this far. If you ever watch like a baby deer fall out, they like fall out sometimes even onto their legs and stumble about. We need so much help, which is great because we need to know that we need each other. But like, we are useless creatures, pragmatically, other than energizing, goodwill and like bonhomme or whatever. So like people gather together to protect children. It's kind of like how tribes form, whether it heads into government or not. You're like, oh, okay, protect the vulnerable. And I think we're doing a good job as a society in general. Like, let's keep paying attention to this. You don't just like leave people behind because they're a suck or a drain on society, or they make your life miserable because they're pooping in the street while you're going to pick up your Starbucks or whatever. We're trying to be like, let's not get too pragmatic in our scientific advancement, where we start acting like certain people aren't worthy of the same thing that you, adjudicator, are. You know what I mean? And I'm excited about that. I think that's a good thing.
And I heard this anecdotally, and there's an African tribe, and I know Africa's a very big place. I don't remember exactly which one.
Yeah.
But I like this idea that like even when the like warriors would meet,
Yeah.
I mean, I assume unless they were actually full on at war, they would ask some version of how are the children?
Yeah.
That's the way to gauge the health of the society and to care about each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like that's our dominant question here in the United States as a
Oh
culture.
God, no. This can be this is part of the social problem of you're like, well, we don't, well, it's weird. We've made children little kings and queens in some ways, in the way that like we let them dictate their own rearing in a way that generations previous to us would be astonished about. But at the same time, like pragmatically and systemically, even, I think but I think it stems from abortion. We, because it's the bottom of the sliding scale, so we're just filling in the gaps. You get in where you fit in. We devalue children pretty highly, and that like the number of children who are like missing meals and close to starving in the United States of America, like it's it's same thing with maternal mortality. There are some aspects of our society that are that are rightfully shameful. Like we should be ashamed as a society at our inability to take care of children. But I think it stems from the fact we don't actually, if you can legally kill them, then you're like, well, whatever, then what? Then whatever. And ultimately, once you grant people the right, you're like, well, you could have killed them. What do you mean? I don't have to. I've given you the legal right. You can legally kill your kid. You didn't have to have a starving kid. You didn't have to be broke with your 4 children. You could have gone and killed him. That would have cost you like a couple $100 a pop. Or if you live in California, Medicaid pays for it. So literally the state pays for you to do it. So it's like they kind of feed each other. So it's hard to solve all the problems at once. But we also have to, I'm recognizing, as most pro-life people I know recognize, there's a ton of problems to solve.
Yeah.
We just want to,
I'll have to consider that correlation. I think one of the opposing thoughts there is that, well, if we're choosing to kill some and allow some to live, then we're making better choices about who is here, and we're gonna provide for them in better ways.
Yeah. You would hope.
Theoretically.
Theoretically.
Right?
Yeah.
But here in Chicago, I mean, last I heard, there's maybe 15,000 kids, going hungry. So you don't have to go to some quote unquote third world country.
No, not at all.
Which I know is a term in a long list of terms. I think we're
trying to phase out. Yeah. Let's transition. But let's maybe, I don't want to run. I want you to run the the outline, but we could flip those principles too, though, since we flipped the previous ones. We could start with what principles does legal abortion uphold, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? So kind of be able to go back and forth on them.
Yeah, I think, right. So moving into principle view, what principles does abortion uphold?
Yeah.
And then we'll ask what principles does it violate? I have a feeling some of these may dance between.
They might. Yeah, I think that's a cool thing about it.
So, I mean, the number one for me, being pro-choice, is that it upholds the sovereignty of the adult pregnant person we know about that's right in front of us.
Yeah. Is that a principle? Is my question. Because I have sovereignty on here for sure. But is that in any way a principle? Or, and I've accused myself of doing this in the same episode, just so everyone knows, where like, is that tailoring, like I might have done with murder, is that tailoring a principle in order to suit this particular thing? Like, because to me, like the sovereignty of the individual is I would say that is a principle. But like, is that a principle we hold, that like the sovereignty of adult individuals? And there's this, I'm not saying this like it isn't, but is that a principle somehow separate or unique or distinct from the more what's the word? I don't know, the broader principle or the more specific principle?
Well, I did find myself adding the word adult there. Which I assume means because children aren't sovereign in our
culture. They aren't.
They don't have rights. And
yes.
whole rights anyway.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And I don't mean to phrase it that way. I don't believe that principle automatically means that it overcomes other kinds of sovereignty, which I know are important to you.
Sure. Yeah.
I just mean like standing alone. If we can like carve that out.
Yes. Yeah.
That person deserves their sovereignty.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. To me, the biggest one is just freedom in the absolute or pure sense. And I think I know freedom is, I guess, according to some headlines, is like a right wing thing. When I was growing up, it was not. It was more of a everybody thing. But full on freedom in the purest sense. Legal abortion, allows people to volitionally exercise freedom principally. Sure, damn, and I'm not trying to pepper in the negative, but there is obviously a damn the torpedoes kind of sensibility to it. But I think I guess this sort of relates to the individual, but like individual freedom, I think is certainly enhanced by, and I know this is maybe even a repetition, but I think that's of the sort of invasion of the state was sort of the harm aspect, but I think this is the principle it violates.
Yeah, and I may be using freedom and sovereignty kind of interchangeably in this case. So yeah, to me, those are pretty well aligned.
Yeah, I think so too. I think legal abortion upholds the principle of I wrote it down a particular way: individual agency to evaluate threats and deal with them as you see fit, which allows essentially an individually relativistic adjudication of your environment. And I think I know that's a long version of it, but I do think the preservation of life as you recognize it. It's kind of intermingled, probably like two principles, honestly. But anyway, I think that is an important principle that is built into our legal system. People say like, right, they're like, and I actually hate it in the legal system, but I like it as a principle where like police will ask, well, did you feel like your life was in danger? And that's like, so they're literally asking you your subjective evaluation of your subjective experience of the threat in order to like whether they arrest this person or not. I was like, well, what if you're just a calm person who doesn't easily get shook? And you're like, well, no, I'm not afraid of any human being, but that person was going to kill me. You know what I mean? I was aware that person was going to kill me. Doesn't mean you have to be afraid. But I do think there's a principle involved there that is important, which is every person is going to have a different perception of threat. And it is vitally important for us to be able to, at the very least, contribute that information of this is what I felt and knew as best as I could adjudicate to be true. You know, if someone kills a dog or whatever, and you'd be like, why did you kill that dog? And you're like, I felt like that dog was going to kill me. And sure, you can then go into, I think there are other things that are important to evaluate that. But the fact that you should be allowed to say, and it is a relevant, it is a relevant element, your sense of threat. And I think it's key to evaluating like whether you end a life, right? Is whether you feel like this life within you is going to threaten your life, whether that's quality of life or trajectory of life or literal, like meaning you would die. Like we have to factor in how that person professes to feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's kind of a tangled one. And again, I do think it might even be two principles, but.
Yeah, and to me that agency, sovereignty, I mean, just trusting, right? Trusting a lot of this. So much of this seems to boil down to, do we trust women? And I think as a society, I would say largely we don't. So that's what I hear there. Like, just do we trust the person, any person really to evaluate the situation at hand and make a decision. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Right. Yeah. And I don't trust people, humans or whatever. I'm like, I'm by nature, I'm an idealistic person, an optimist, but I'm skeptical of claims. So then if anyone says, oh, I was scared, I thought that person was going to kill me, my first thought is not, and this is my lack of empathy, is not, oh no. My first thought is always, really? Really? So it's why I love talking to you, because I think your instinct is more like, oh no. You know what I mean? Oh no, that sounds terrible. That sounds frightening. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I buy that, but okay. And then unless you have one, freedom of religion. Because the value of human life, the fact that any human life has value, is a religious question. It's not like a purely objective thing outside of a religious or presuppositional truth claim. That any human has value. You, me, the trash man, or the person in my womb. In which case, if freedom religion is a principle, it certainly is an operating principle for a nation, then to limit anyone in that is ultimately a violation, technically, of someone's freedom to practice their religion.
Yeah, I'm aligned with that.
Yeah.
One that's coming for me is,
yeah,
I don't know, it may sort of straddle the line, or you may kick it into the other category, but something like balance with nature or natural order. I think you brought that up earlier, maybe around natural order. And it might even be like a micro thing. So at a macro level, to me, this relates back to how we consume resources on Earth, which to me is wildly out of balance. And so in a way, fewer people, I think, is a better relationship with nature, at least the way we're doing it now. Like, we could also change that by just changing how we consume and how we throw plastic into the ocean and shit like that. Which, so I'm not generally, I don't spend much time thinking about population control.
Good. Yeah.
But based on how we function with nature, I see the benefits of it in that way. But again, would you consider that a principle? Or?
Well, I don't know. I think what's the word? I don't know what the principle would be. Just stewardship. I would call it creation. Just stewardship of creation. I think that is absolutely principle upon the human, just pragmatically as well as ethically. Like, we are, as a Christian, it's literally a commandment to sort of the dominion over creation is meant to honor creation. Like, we look at the world and all the entire universe as created by God, and so it's disrespectful to treat it disrespectfully, or to treat it rapaciously or unpragmatically. You know what I mean? So you can kill an animal, but like, you slaughter all the buffalo so like native peoples can't eat. Those are, one of those is responsible. We have to consume life to eat. And we have to eat some sort of life, plant or animal, in order to continue to exist. The other one is again, it's the difference between killing and murdering. Really, that's how. So yes, I would agree with that principle as well. If you have any more, we can swap over the other one, or you can run us through wherever we head to next.
Let's move into what principles does it violate? Does abortion violate?
Yeah, I would just say bodily autonomy. The same way in freedom in the purest sense, legal abortion violates bodily autonomy in the absolute sense. And that, because I would say classically, ethically, the sovereignty of your body ends at the point at which your body harms another or invades on another person's sort of sovereign lands. And maybe that's a little separatist and not as communal as I could be principally, but I think it's a pretty safe one. And for me, there's the geographic location of that person, whether they're at arm's length, reaching out, or arm's length reaching in, is of no consequence to the absolute violation of bodily autonomy.
Yeah, and couching it in the definition of life starting at conception, yes, that is, when we're talking about the autonomy of two humans, that to me is the principal conflict here.
And then I guess this might even be the same, but it's same or different is this, and we've already kind of talked about this, so we don't have to do it, but I just want to list kind of in a way, the sovereignty of the individual, meaning we presuppose in that outside of a volitional expression that someone's life be ended or their own attempt to end their life, we kind of presuppose the king to remain alive in order for the king to continue to rule, us all being kings and queens of our own, the domain of ourselves. So I think it sort of overrides the sovereignty of the internal, the internal individual.
So maybe the distinction, I think I muddle these words a little bit. Autonomy being more about like I am autonomous and I
like, yeah, operational.
Yeah, I exist as a I don't know. I know we were just talking about individualism. It's a whole other episode, but I exist on my own. I am a biological being, and then sovereignty being more about, and probably more like related to agency. Like, do I?
Yeah. Yes, I think so too.
Do I have control over my being? And obviously, yes. In order to have control over a being, that being would have to be alive.
Yeah, that was well said. I like how you rephrase that. Protection. I would say protection of the vulnerable. I feel like is a social ethical obligation. And I know your work in the sort of intersectionality framework is kind of built sort of upon that. And I do believe it is an individual and social, therefore social responsibility that we are to protect the vulnerable. That means people who are not like mentally well enough to be employed, then it is on us as a collective to help figure out what they can do. Because I do want people to like be productive in whatever manner of productive they can manage. And that doesn't have to be within the capitalist system of revenue producing, but just of contributing whatever they're contributing. But I genuinely believe that some people's contribution to this existence is to be taken care of. I know some people won't like that. People, anti-welfare people won't like that. But again, like with someone born with Down syndrome, or my sister is on the autism spectrum, is probably going to need someone taking care of her entire life. She contributes what she does contribute to the world. I want her to grow in that and contribute more of what she has to give, whatever it is she has to give. But ultimately, I also feel like it is my dad's, my stepmom, whoever it is our responsibility as a community to take a special care to shelter those that are vulnerable from harm, from destitution, from starvation, from whatever. I mean, I think that's one of the points of coming together as a collective, however you assemble yourselves.
Yeah, and I want to believe, you're helping me believe that there could be like that notion could be more broadly applied through the pro-life ideology as a principle, obviously outside of the womb, right? That's all life.
Yeah.
All vulnerable life. Right?
All vulnerable life. Yeah, it has to apply. Well, that's to me, that's the point of principles, is they have to apply either with exclusivity or near exclusivity. You know what I mean? Or essentially as exclusive with exceptions, because we're human beings. like war is evil, right? War is bad. I can go ahead and say that as a principle. Let's avoid war, but you can't avoid war. So, or we haven't figured it out yet, you know?
Exactly. The evidence is clear. Okay. Any more on principles?
Well, for me, and I have to state it in this, this goes to sort of principle related to freedom of religion, is for me a principle of existence, for me rooted in scripture and the word of God, is thou shalt not murder. And the reason, as much as we can ascertain from, is because of what's called imago Dei, which means the image of God. Sort of in Genesis says, God created man in the image of God. And honestly, what the image of God means is multi-hypothesis and could mean a whole bunch of different things. But men and women we're dimorphic species, were created equal. So we know men and women are equal in their image of Godness. And So that is the principle upon the creational principle, just like in our Constitution functions in the same way, right? These rights have been, are endowed by their creator, so that it functions in the same fashion. So that's the underpinning, the imago Dei of all human beings, which is why you don't kill them, which is why human beings have value. So then you don't, which is why murder is wrong. So murder is wrong because God said, "Thou shalt not murder," but presuppositionally, we don't murder because essentially it's an offense not only against sort of natural law, but against God himself. That it's by murdering another person, you are seeking to murder the sort of the God, the aspect of God which they are revealed. And we humans are distinctly valuable because we're made in the image of God. So that's why murdering a person is different than murdering, say, a cow or an elephant or a broccoli or whatever. Or no, let's say fungi, because they recently found out that fungi might have language of up to 51 words and may experience up to like, I can't even remember how many like states of quote unquote what they perceive maybe what akin to emotion. So let's use fungi.
Well, it is fascinating with animals. Like I don't know. I usually point to eating meat as the I guess the greatest contribution I am making to destroying the earth. And there is something there, when I learned that cuttlefish are, super smart.
Yeah, pigs are really smart.
I was gonna say pigs are pretty smart, but I blame pigs. I'm sorry, that's a horrible evolutionary strategy to taste that good.
I know. All you have to do is get one hit by lightning and everything is going to eat that thing. Let's be honest. Right. All right. So you're
but there is a, I don't branch off too much, but that to me is I struggle with that because that's starting to evaluate like the value of life more broadly with animals, of course, but it's related in that way of like, oh, why did I don't know, that feels kind of capitalist, right? To be like, oh, well, this life is more valuable suddenly because it's smart, because it can solve a maze, or because it has language, or the things I can relate to as a
totally
as a little human,
Yeah, well, that puts us again in that general conundrum, is that life must be ended in order for life to continue. That is just how pretty much every species on the planet consumes some form of life in order to maintain its life. And if you don't consume life, you die straight up. Like if you and I cease consuming some form of something that was either still living while we're eating it or was formerly living, then we die. So that puts it, we're in a weird conundrum. It's a weird place to be, man. But anyway, that's why traditionally, at least in the Western world, that would kind of be the separation. Because I've had a lot of conversations with people who are like, well, you're opposed to abortion. Do you eat meat? And then I'll be like, do you eat mushrooms? And then we have longer conversations that go just about as well as that does.
This just occurred to me, slight non sequitur, about East and West. I swear we're gonna have this whole language episode, or maybe 10.
Yeah.
But I saw people pushing against Eastern and Western. And I certainly like the maps that kind of redraw the world theoretically according to their actual proportions, or put Africa in the middle.
Yeah.
Like, because obviously, here in the US is obviously a US centric mentality, and I think we've exported that in many ways. But I was like, well, if Africa as the center and the motherland, well, East and West actually kind of, I don't know, it seems to make sense from that perspective.
That's kind of our as we spread out that way and that way and that way. And of course it has, I think, as much to do with like the flow of ideas or whatever. So then that's the nice thing about sort of East and West, is it's not even necessarily the nice thing in modern society. It's not colored. It's not any particular color. You know what I mean? Many of the ideas of the West are fundamentally biblical because the strange dominion of sort of Christian thought or whatever, or even sort of post-Judaic thought, meaning Christian and then Islam. And most of those thoughts were really crystallized and in many ways homogenized, like in Africa, like in literally that central area. But they did seem to pervade more one direction than the other, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, and I'm sure I have lots of things to drop in from starting to listen to The Dawn of Everything. But one of the things they pointed out about Greek philosophy, which is
Yeah.
our logo, so to speak,
Yeah.
was that back then it probably had more to do with Middle Eastern and African culture than it did with European culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it goes the world around, the whole asking questions thing. So, okay, so we've lit through cost benefit analysis, view of principles or ethical principles that may be involved. So
Take a breath. Yeah, breath. Always a good idea. Little plug for my friend just wrote a book called The Leadership Pause. Take a pause. Yeah. Good idea.
Yeah.
Take
a pause. Take 2 paws and then realize that's an animal you just killed. Is abortion ethical? We return to the question. We kind of bring it in for a landing. There, you actually have literal pause. Take 2 paws.
So, ethical strengths of abolishing abortion, and then contrasting that with ethical strengths of legalizing abortion.
Yeah. Which we kind of looked at principle and through this. This is sort of, I thought this is a way to kind of land it in summary.
Yes. What have we learned in the now, I don't know, 6 or so hours?
Yeah.
Recorded hours, and then beyond that.
Yeah, just recorded. I know.
Well, in the context of an ethic of preserving all life,
yeah,
all human life, and protecting the vulnerable, that to me seems like an ethical strength of abolishing abortion.
Yeah. Let's see, what an ethical strength of abortion. Ethical strength of legalizing. I think the dominant ethical strength of legalizing abortion is. Oh, it's funny. I think we talked about this off.
Wait, I think we're on abolishing.
Oh, sorry, you're doing abolishing. Oh, gotcha. I thought. Sorry. Ethical strength of abolishing. Yeah, I would. I think that is the principal one. Is upholding the value of human individual life. And the ethical strength is maintaining in terms of principle, maintaining principle clarity as opposed to carving out an exception in this area essentially on murder. That we're like, this would be a rare, like we talked about too, that is by allowing a mother to decide whether to kill her child, then you are granting a single individual the full sovereign rights ultimately of the state or the ruling body, which to some would be good. But judge, jury, essentially a single person to be judge, jury, and executioner. Or let's be serious here. I think we talked about this in text. Actually, the mother isn't usually the person who actually kills the child. It's actually usually a man, dominantly men, but women as well, but literally to another person who's not related to that child. So literally pays for someone to do it. So that person actually should have no agency whatsoever over the individual body that they address. So I think it's a violation in that sense. But we don't carve out an exception for a single individual to become judge, jury, and executioner of any other person. I think I think one of the tentpole ethical strengths, because I don't know any other instance where we want that to be a principle that we allow, that just sort of without fetter. Like when police do it, who are the closest thing in our society to having that capacity, when a police officer decides in and of himself, this person is a waste of space or a threat to me, I'm judge, jury, and executioner of the guilt of this person and the threat of this person and the uselessness of this person, and kills them. Or the state does it, right? And they even do it after like a 10-month trial, or if it's a horrendous miscarriage of justice, a 3-hour trial, which has certainly happened. I don't think that principle should be. I think that's such an ethical good that we wouldn't want to provide any exceptions for that. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So with the ethical strengths of legalizing abortion.
Yes.
This may take a little tinkering, but what I have is eliminating the state imposition for a pregnant person to provide resources and compromise their life for the sake of another person.
Mm. Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, because that one sits alongside the one I just stated too, which then says that that individual is the sole determinant of what evaluates, which is one of the ethical strengths in general we talked about, right? Individual agency to evaluate threats or benefit. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. But I see it. If nothing else, I can say I understand what you mean.
I think that's the best we could hope for in this dialogue. I don't think it was
probably right. Like, yeah. I know what you mean. I mean, yeah, but you know, as you know, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I see that. However, you know, it just becomes one of those things, right? You're like, oh, well, is that, does that internally violate a principle? I guess is my only question. Meaning, does quality of life or one's individual appraisal of one's quality of life ever become principally ethically allowable, morally correct, morally right as a reason to kill someone else? Or do we reserve principally threat, like actual threat to existence, like life, not just anything outside of that? You know what I mean? I'm trying to think of anywhere else where that principle would apply. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like, well, is there yeah, kind of like with the gang? I use the weird Genghis Khan thing. You know what I mean? Like, well, it can be an outlandish example even.
That's the sticky wicket here. I mean, it's the way you phrase that. I would say, well, lots of people flat out murder people to steal $50.
Yes.
Theoretically improve their life. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
Buy something, you know, maybe maybe it was something, a basic need like food, maybe something else. I don't know.
Right. But
we obviously don't support that as an ethic, as something we want happening.
Yeah. I'm trying to. Yeah.
So to me, this is a carved out exception because
okay,
the time one person is literally inside of another person.
Yeah.
Okay. That imposition is very clear and present.
Yeah. So is it? So wait, would you carve out a sole exception, or do you mean with the exception of undue imposition? You know what I'm saying? Like, is this just literally the only occasion?
For where I am in my development through this, it is a sole exception, because otherwise you could imagine all kinds of, you know, I don't know. You're a parent. Have you ever been sick of your children?
Oh, for sure. Well, yeah, no, because to me, that's my danger of it. Is like, if you carve out an exception for the most vulnerable, then this is the bottom of the slippery slope concept. Is then anywhere in between, meaning anything like, for example, anyone who is reliant upon the state for their personal welfare, then it is the right of the state to do with that life sort of what you will. Or likewise for children of any age, or again, someone of limited neurological development, if they're like absolutely reliant on someone else, then that person does have sovereign, by this same principle, would have sovereign right to end that person's life if they were like, this is kind of what they adjudicate the best way. Which, listen, we do have other exceptions for. So like if someone is in a catatonic state, for example, over an extended period of time, I think as long as to me in general, I was like, I would agree with your principle in as much as long as we exhaust every other, every other attempt to make this life continue, right? Like in the, since the doctor's the one ending it, right? And they're violating the original Hippocratic Oath, which literally prohibits abortion. But if the first ethical principle of a doctor is to do no harm, let's be honest, they must violate that principle frequently, a la chemotherapy or surgery. You're literally slicing into someone. That is harm. It is harm when you stab a knife in someone. And even if it's a nice, clean scalpel, that is harm. So they're doing harm and violating the principle. However, you don't generally ever do any of those things unless you have exhausted previous, like you make as many attempts as possible before you do the thing that may lead to harm or has danger to it. You know what I mean? Except in obviously emergency scenarios, there are emergency exceptions. But principally, I think as long as you exhaust every other attempt. But again, this is me harking too much on the like preservation of life. Like, okay, well, like capital punishment, you have to like, you better have a long trial and it better be fair. And if we find out it's in no way not fair, you pull them off death row immediately. You know, that sort of thing. Like I have an abundance of caution, perhaps, in that application. Or same thing with the medical procedures or blah blah blah.
Yeah, it almost feels like a de facto power of attorney. Of the pregnant person. I think one thing that you and I hold very differently is, because to me, like the exception here is like the radical truth that this is the gestation of human life is a unique circumstance.
Yeah.
All other examples, it's like two beings out in the air, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm not here arguing that fetus is not necessarily a human life.
Yeah.
But I am arguing for the exception that it's inside of another person.
Yeah.
So that to me is just what I always come back to. Whereas I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you maybe even think that's irrelevant. It's just like, well, they are two lives. Doesn't matter if they're inside each other or not.
Yeah. I guess, I don't, because to me, I guess that's like a geographical exception, principally. And I was like, I think, I guess I don't carve out geographic exceptions. Or what is it? Then the elements, right? A geographic exception or a developmental exception or a, what's the word? Like responsibility, power of attorney exception, right? Because I was like, well, that doesn't principally apply anywhere else. So then, but of course, is this the exception that proves the rule, right? That makes the rule a rule. Although I was something you brought up last time that I thought was really cool. You kept using this phrase, and I've used it this week a couple of times, was dignity and agency. And then we also talked a little bit about like, maybe this is offline, on like duty and obligation. Is there an ethical obligation for a parent to do their best to foster their children's life growth and development? Now, knowing that there could be multiple principles to also counter that, for example, right? Like sometime a parent, let's say their child is a serial rapist and keeps robbing their home, and eventually they end up catching their child in their house, raping their sister, and they shoot their child in the head. That would obviously violate the principle, but I would be okay with that personally. That would be extenuating, allowing for extenuating circumstances. But I would say that there is an ethical, for parents, it is an ethical good as opposed to ethical bad to foster, care for, and protect the life of your child. But that may be a principle you don't think exists or whatever. I was like, I realized we hadn't talked through that yet. But
I generally do actually, and I think that is a conflict. Because it is essentially coming back to like the moment of birth being, I guess, the moment that defines when that.
Yeah.
And again, it does fit. It is consistent with that exception, because the moment of birth is the moment that the two bodies become independent. Well, that's not the right word. They're clearly very dependent of each other, even at the moment of birth. But physically separate. Like I get. So much of this to me just hinges on that.
No longer, what is it? Geographically intermingled, or the Venn diagram is no longer completely overlapped. Yeah. The Venn diagram is literally is a circle inside of a circle. It's not even really Venn, except in principle. Okay, cool. Well, because that's a principle I do think is important to consider. A lot of people I don't even think about, because I would consider that an ethical good, which is why it's very, again, I can just answer because I know you do have to do other things in your life. And I would love to think about something else for next week.
We're releasing ourselves.
From like, hey, we solved everything. You're welcome. No, but that, that it is, so to me, it clearly makes abortion unethical. Like it makes an ethical wrong or ethical bad or an ethical violation. Like it literally is morally wrong. It is ethically improper to abort your child, even if it is, but while still allowing, we've had plenty of conversation as to whether it would be legally allowable or all that sort of thing. But I think that's in some ways why I think we haven't talked too much about specifics of application, other than like the social harms that could result or will likely result from either abolition or continuance. But I think that, and it's funny. I don't know, like I fully would have thought of it had you not brought up the word dignity. I think dignity really was like, I think that's such a good word. You say dignity and agency, because that's even different than sovereignty. Because sovereignty, we can think of like a tyrant is still a sovereign, you know what I mean? But dignity means like dignity has to do with like nobility. Like you are worthwhile and you act like it. You're made in the image of God and you act like it. You know what I mean? I think dignity is excellent. Just a cool word choice, and I liked it a lot.
Well, thank you. Yeah. That one's been for several years now, actually. Like, I think I've looked at a lot of things through that lens. Like, well, what does dignity and agency exist here, or how could it? And
yeah,
it's challenging to like have a very concise framework or worldview.
It's no doubt. That's why this takes 6 hours.
Well, I feel complete with this. In some ways, I mean, I've said this a few times. I've certainly learned a lot. It's opened up so many more questions. I will continue learning and growing. Maybe someday parts of this podcast will make me cringe. I don't know. But we're here to put it out and have these discussions from a place of love and respect and dignity. And we're not here to impose that on you, and we're not here to say we have all the answers. But no. There it is.
Yeah, this is possible, y'all. You can have these conversations. And I never screamed at Andy that he was a baby killer.
You had to end it on that, didn't
you? Yeah. Well, no, I think that's what, because I really, truly, I think that's the thing people are so afraid of. And I know it sounds silly, but this is another episode, but people are deathly afraid in our culture. Oh my gosh, I'm on such a like AM radio. You know what people are afraid of in our culture? They're afraid of being called names, but it's really true. People are afraid of being called racist, homophobe, transphobe, whatever, capitalist pig. But people are like being afraid of being called baby killer, or I don't know. What are the mean things? What's a mean insult people say about pro-life people?
I was trying to think of one. Crazy.
Yeah.
I don't think it's quite as like direct.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I need to spend more time.
Yeah.
Mother,
woman hater. There you go. Misogynist.
Anti-pro-life memes, but
misogynist. So like people are so afraid of being called names. Honestly, because they're afraid of tribal rejection, but they're also afraid of what if those names are true. But again, we can talk to each other. We can disagree. We can wrangle it out. And I think the same unity that you and I have, Andy, towards the, if nothing else, the hope of reducing harm. I invite anyone who wants to have these kinds of conversations, at least offer that as some sort of olive branch in any of these conversations. Enter in, assuming until proven otherwise, that the person you're speaking to wants to make the world a better place. And hopefully they will assume the same of you, and we can have these conversations till the cows come home. So thank you for talking to me and helping me think, Andy.
Thank you. Love you.
Love you.